You plant a tomato. You get tomatoes for 3 months. You plant asparagus. You get asparagus for 20 years. Sounds like a cheat code. Right. Well, it is. And you're about to learn how to unlock it. Most gardeners are stuck on the hamster wheel. Plant, harvest, till, repeat. Every single spring. But what if I told you there's a category of plants that laugh at this cycle? Plants you put in the ground once, and they keep producing food year after year, sometimes for decades. No replanting. No tilling. Just harvest after harvest after harvest. These are called perennial crops. And they're about to change everything you thought you knew about gardening. Now you might be thinking, sure, everyone knows about fruit trees. But we're not talking about waiting 7 years for your first apple. We're talking about vegetables, herbs, things you can start harvesting in year 1 and keep going until you're too old to hold the basket. Let's get into it. Number 12. Rhubarb, the pie plant that refuses to die. Rhubarb looks like celery that went to anger management classes and came back worse. Those thick red stalks aren't technically a fruit, but try telling that to every pie baker in the Northern Hemisphere. Once you plant rhubarb, you've basically adopted a very productive, very stubborn relative who will outlive your mortgage. That's what they call the root system. Will produce stalks for 15 to 20 years minimum. Some patches have been documented producing for over 50 years. That's longer than most marriages. You plant it once in early spring, give it some decent soil and partial shade, and by year 2 you're pulling stalks thick as your thumb. The harvest window runs from April through June in most climates. You just grab a stalk near the base, twist, and pull. Don't cut it. Cutting invites disease. Each plant can give you anywhere from 3 to 5 pounds of stalks per harvest, and you can harvest 2 or 3 times per season without stressing the plant. Do the math. That's potentially 10 pounds of rhubarb every year for 2 decades from one plant. And here's where it gets interesting. Rhubarb actually performs better in cold climates. It needs that winter chill to break dormancy properly. Gardeners in zones 3 through 8 are living in rhubarb paradise. The plant basically goes dormant underground when temperatures drop, then explodes back to life when spring arrives. No babying required. No winter protection needed in most areas. The leaves are toxic, by the way. They contain oxalic acid. Don't eat those. Just the stalks. But even the toxicity works in your favor because pests generally leave rhubarb alone. Deer won't touch it. Rabbits give it a hard pass. It's the plant equivalent of a home security system. Asparagus, the patience test, that pays off. Asparagus is the long game. The investment account of the vegetable world. You plant crowns in year 1, you harvest nothing. Year 2, still nothing. Maybe a few tiny spears if you're lucky, but you're supposed to let those grow. Year 3, now we're talking. And from year 3 onwards for the next 15 to 25 years, you're harvesting asparagus. Once established, a 10-foot row of asparagus can produce up to 30 pounds of spears per season. Every single spring. Like clockwork. The harvest window is roughly 6 to 8 weeks. Starting when soil temperatures hit 50 degrees Fahrenheit. You'll see these thick spears just pushing through the soil, growing so fast you can practically watch them. You're out there every single day, cutting spears that grew overnight. Here's what makes asparagus genuinely special beyond the longevity. When your annual garden is still mud and dreams, asparagus is already producing food, that psychological boost of fresh vegetables in early April when everything else is still frozen, that's worth the wait. The cutting technique matters. You want to snap or cut spears when they're 6 to 8 inches tall, before the tips start to open and get feathery. The spear gets tough and bitter. Some gardeners swear by snapping them by hand at the natural breaking point. Others use a knife to cut just below soil level. Both work. The plant doesn't care. Now, asparagus does demand some respect. It wants full sun. At least 8 hours. It wants well-drained soil because sitting in water will rot those crowns faster than you can say root rot. And it wants to be left alone during the off-season. Those ferny tops that grow after harvest season ends, leave them. They're photosynthesizing and feeding the crown system underground for next year's production. Plant asparagus once, harvest for a quarter century. Not a bad deal. Number 10. Globe artichokes. The thistle that conquered California. Artichokes look like something that should be guarding a castle, Not sitting on your dinner plate. They're technically a thistle. A very, very fancy thistle that produces these massive scaled flower buds you can steam and dip in butter. And in the right climate, they're perennial. Here's the catch. Globe artichokes are perennial in zones 7 through 11. If you live where winters stay relatively mild, above 20 degrees Fahrenheit, your artichoke plant will come back year after year for up to 5 years of production. Gardeners in California and the Pacific Northwest have been living in artichoke luxury for decades. Each plant produces anywhere from a dozen to several dozen buds per year depending on the variety and growing conditions. The primary bud forms at the top of the main stalk and gets massive, sometimes the size of a softball. Then secondary buds form on side shoots. You harvest those before the scales start to open and flower. Once it flowers, you've waited too long, and the bud gets tough. The first-year plant might give you a few buds. Year 2 is when production explodes. Year 3 is peak performance. After year 5, production starts declining, and most gardeners replace the plant. But 5 years of harvests from one planting? That still counts as perennial in our book. Artichokes are also ridiculously beautiful plants. Silvery green, deeply lobed leaves that can spread 4 feet wide. If you let a few buds flower, they turn into these spectacular purple thistle blooms that pollinators absolutely lose their minds over. You can grow them purely as ornamentals, and the edible buds are just a bonus. Cold climate gardeners aren't completely locked out. You can grow artichokes as annuals, starting fresh each spring. But that's not the perennial dream we're chasing here. Number 9. Sorrel. The lemony leaf nobody talks about. Sorrel is the herb that tastes like lemons and spinach had a baby. Sharp, tangy, bright green leaves that add this incredible citrus punch to salads, soups, and sauces without you needing to juice a single lemon. French cuisine has been obsessed with sorrel for centuries. Americans mostly forgot it exists. That's about to change. Plant sorrel once, harvest for 6 to 8 years. It's that simple. French sorrel, Romex scutatus, is the variety you want. It forms these low clumps of shield-shaped leaves that you can start harvesting about 8 weeks after planting, and then you just keep harvesting. Pick the outer leaves, let the inner ones grow. It regrows faster than you can eat it. Each plant produces leaves continuously from early spring through late fall as long as temperatures stay reasonable. In mild climates, sorrel produces year-round. A single plant can give you several pounds of leaves per season. And since you use sorrel as an accent flavor, not as the bulk of a dish, a few plants will keep your kitchen stocked indefinitely. Sorrel is borderline indestructible. It tolerates partial shade, which makes it perfect for planting under fruit trees or in those awkward garden corners that don't get full sun. It tolerates poor soil, though it grows better in decent earth like everything else. It self-seeds aggressively if you let it flower, which means you get free baby sorrel plants popping up nearby. The main maintenance task is cutting back flower stalks. It shoots up these tall stalks covered in small reddish seeds. If you're not interested in seeds or baby plants everywhere, just cut those stalks at the base when they appear. This keeps the plant focused on leaf production instead of reproduction. Pests ignore sorrel. Diseases avoid it. It's too easy, which makes it perfect for lazy gardeners who want massive returns for minimal effort. Number 8. Walking onions. The plant that migrates, also called Egyptian walking onions or tree onions, are exactly as weird as they sound. Instead of making normal flowers, they make clusters of tiny bulbs on top of tall stalks. These top bulbs get heavy. The stalk bends over. The bulbs touch the ground and root, creating a new plant a few feet away from the parent. Over years, a patch of walking onions literally walks across your garden. Every part of this plant is edible. The underground bulbs taste like shallots. The green stalks taste like scallions. The little top bulbs are like intense mini onions perfect for pickling or roasting whole. You plant them once and you have 3 different onion products forever, wandering around your garden beds like they own the place. A small patch of walking onions, maybe 10 plants, will spread to 30 or 40 plants within 3 years if you let them walk. You can harvest greens continuously during the growing season by cutting stalks at ground level. New growth appears within days. You can dig up underground bulbs in early spring or late fall when the plant is dormant. And you can harvest the top bulbs in summer when they mature. The multiplication rate is honestly kind of aggressive. If you ignore a patch of walking onions for a few years, you'll have more walking onions than you know what to do with. Which sounds like a problem until you realize you've just created an infinite source of onion flavor that requires zero work. Want to share with neighbors? Dig up a few clumps and hand them over. The plant reproduces faster than you can give it away. Walking onions are cold hardy to zone 3. They survive brutal winters underground and pop back up in spring like nothing happened. They tolerate a wide range of soils. They don't need fertilizer. They barely need water once established. If you're looking for the ultimate low-maintenance perennial crop, walking onions are making a very strong case for themselves. Number 7. Horseradish. The root that won't quit. Let's be extremely clear about horseradish. Once you plant it, you have horseradish forever. Not in the nice perennial crop way. In the "this plant will outlive me and possibly my children" way. Horseradish is borderline invasive. It spreads through underground roots that break easily, and every broken piece becomes a new plant. You will never fully remove horseradish once it's established. Ever. But if you love horseradish, this is amazing news. You plant one root cutting in a corner of your garden, and you have fresh horseradish for cocktail sauce, roast beef, and Bloody Marys until the end of time. Each fall, you dig up part of the root system, grate it fresh, and the plant doesn't even notice. It grows back stronger the next year. Mature horseradish roots get thick as your forearm and long as your leg. One plant produces enough root for an entire year's worth of fresh horseradish for most families. The flavor of fresh grated horseradish makes store-bought versions taste like cardboard in comparison. That sinus-clearing, eye-watering punch that makes you feel alive? That's only achievable with fresh root. The plant itself is actually quite attractive. Large, dark green leaves that form a bushy clump about 3 feet tall. It rarely flowers. The growth strategy is entirely focused on those underground roots, spreading slowly and steadily outward from the original planting site. Give it average soil, occasional water, and ignore it. That's the entire care routine. Harvesting happens in late fall after frost or in early spring before new growth starts. You dig down around the main root, cut off sections, and replant some pieces to maintain your patch. The pieces you keep go straight to the grater. Mix fresh grated horseradish with vinegar and a pinch of salt within minutes of grating, or it turns brown and loses potency. The only real concern with horseradish is placement. Plant it somewhere you're okay with it living forever. Raised beds are ideal because they contain the root spread somewhat. Planting it next to your annual vegetable garden where you'll be tilling every year is asking for horseradish to infiltrate everything. Choose wisely. Then enjoy decades of fresh horseradish whenever you want it. Number 6. Lovage. The celery that actually tastes like celery. Lovage is what celery wishes it could be. Intense, concentrated celery flavor in leaves, stems, seeds, and roots. One plant grows 6 feet tall and 4 feet wide, producing enough celery-flavored foliage to supply your entire neighborhood. And it comes back every year for a decade or more. The flavor is so strong that you use lovage more like an herb than a vegetable. A few leaves chopped into soup give you all the celery flavor you need. A stalk or two in a stock pot creates the base for incredible broth. The hollow stems can be candied, like angelica. The seeds taste like celery seeds but more intense. Every part of this plant is edible and flavorful. A single lovage plant produces several pounds of harvestable leaves and stems throughout the growing season. You harvest by cutting outer stalks at the base, letting the center continue growing. In rich soil with adequate moisture, lovage grows so vigorously you'll struggle to harvest it fast enough. The plant wants to be 7 feet tall. It wants to dominate your garden. Let it. Lovage is extremely cold hardy, surviving winters down to zone 4 without protection. It tolerates partial shade, making it useful in forest garden settings or alongside buildings. The main requirement is moisture. Lovage wants consistent water, especially during hot summer months. Let it dry out and the leaves get bitter and tough. The plant dies back completely in winter, disappearing underground. It emerges from nothing, and within weeks it's shoulder high again. That rapid spring growth is when leaves are most tender and flavorful. As the season progresses and the plant focuses energy on flowering, leaves get tougher. Just keep cutting it back to encourage tender new growth. Bees absolutely love lovage flowers. If you let your plant flower in midsummer, it becomes a pollinator magnet covered in yellow-green flower clusters that buzz with activity. After flowering, seeds form. Collect these seeds for cooking or let them drop for potential new baby plants. Though lovage doesn't self-seed as aggressively as some perennials. One plant is honestly enough for most households unless you're running a restaurant or making celery-flavored products commercially. But one plant from one initial planting giving you a decade of celery flavor, that's the perennial promise paying off. Number 5. Good King Henry. The forgotten spinach substitute. Good King Henry sounds like a pub name, but it's actually a traditional European perennial vegetable that was once as common as potatoes and got completely forgotten during the 20th century. Now it's making a comeback among gardeners who are tired of replanting spinach every 6 weeks. The plant produces edible leaves, shoots, and flower buds. Young leaves are used like spinach, raw in salads or cooked in any dish calling for greens. Spring shoots are harvested and prepared like asparagus, blanched and buttered. Flower buds can be cooked like broccoli. It's 3 vegetables in one plant that lives for 5 to 10 years. Good King Henry is ridiculously tough. It tolerates poor soil, heavy shade, drought, and frost. It's native to European mountains, so it laughs at difficult growing conditions. The main challenge with Good King Henry is actually finding the plant to buy in the first place. Most garden centers don't carry it. You'll likely need to order from specialty perennial nurseries or seed companies focused on unusual edibles. Once established, each plant produces harvestable leaves from early spring through late fall. You pick outer leaves continuously, and the plant keeps making more. Production slows during the hottest summer months, but picks back up in fall. In mild climates, you can harvest year-round. The flavor is similar to spinach but slightly more mineral and earthy. Some people love it, some people find it a bit strong. Cooking reduces any strong flavors. Mix it with milder greens if you're unsure. The young spring shoots are the real treasure though. Blanch them by covering plants with buckets in early spring to exclude light. The shoots grow pale and tender, with a mild asparagus-like flavor that's genuinely delicious. Good King Henry self-seeds moderately if allowed to flower. You'll get volunteer plants appearing around the parent, which you can either transplant to desired locations or remove if you're already swimming in greens. The plant's main requirement is patience in year 1. You don't harvest much the first season. Let the plant establish. Year 2 and beyond, harvest freely. Number 4. Sunchokes. The tuberous takeover you'll love and regret. Sunchokes, also called Jerusalem artichokes even though they're not from Jerusalem and aren't artichokes, are the most productive perennial crop on this list. They're also the most aggressive. Plant 1 tuber, and within 3 years you'll have a 40-foot patch producing hundreds of pounds of food. Whether you wanted that or not, these plants are North American natives related to sunflowers. They grow 8 to 10 feet tall with cheerful yellow flowers in late summer. Underground, they produce these knobby tubers that taste like sweet, nutty water chestnuts with a crisp texture even after cooking. You harvest tubers from late fall through early spring by digging around the base of plants. A single sunchoke tuber planted in spring becomes a 6-foot-tall plant by summer. That plant produces a cluster of 10 to 20 new tubers by fall. Each of those tubers can become a new plant next year. The multiplication is exponential. After a few years, you're harvesting pounds and pounds of tubers per square foot. The productivity is genuinely insane. A 10 by 10 foot patch can produce over 100 pounds of tubers in a good year. Compare that to potatoes, which need to be replanted annually, and produce maybe 30 pounds in the same space. Sunchokes win on productivity. Period. Sunchokes contain inulin instead of starch. Inulin is a prebiotic fiber that human digestive systems struggle with. Eat too many sunchokes, especially if you're not accustomed to them, and you'll experience epic digestive distress. Gas, bloating, the whole digestive symphony. They're nicknamed fartichokes for a reason. Start small, eat a few ounces at first. Let your gut bacteria adjust. Some people never develop tolerance. Others can eat them freely after acclimation. Know your body. The other consideration is containment. Sunchokes spread aggressively through underground tubers. Any fragment left in soil becomes a new plant. If you don't want them taking over your entire yard, plant them in a very deep raised bed, or use underground barriers extending at least 2 feet down. Or embrace the chaos and let them colonize unused areas. Cold hardiness is exceptional, zones 3 through 9. And tubers sit dormant underground surviving brutal freezes. They explode back to life. No winter protection needed anywhere. Despite the digestive and spreading concerns, sunchokes remain one of the highest calorie perennial crops you can grow. If you're serious about producing actual food calories from perennials, not just greens and herbs sunchokes deliver, just plant them somewhere you're okay with them living forever. Number 3. Turkish rocket. The leafy green that laughs at winter. Turkish rocket, also called Turkish rhubarb or wild rhubarb, even though it's not related to rhubarb, is a massive perennial green that produces edible leaves from early spring through late fall and remains semi-evergreen in mild winters. It's basically spinach that turned into a shrub. The plant forms a low rosette of large, wavy leaves that can spread 3 feet across. Leaves are harvested young for salads or larger for cooking like chard or kale. The flavor is mild when young, slightly tangy when mature. One plant produces continuous harvest for 5 to 8 years with minimal care. Turkish rocket is exceptionally cold hardy, surviving zone 4 winters without protection. It's also shade tolerant, producing well with just 4 to 6 hours of sun. This makes it perfect for forest gardens or the north side of buildings where most vegetables struggle. Planted in a corner you're not sure what to do with, and Turkish rocket will turn that space into a green production zone. The plant self-seeds enthusiastically if allowed to flower. Second-year plants send up tall flower stalks with small white flowers. Let these set seed, and you'll have baby Turkish rocket appearing throughout your garden. Either embrace this free multiplication or cut flower stalks before seeds mature to prevent spreading. Harvest leaves continuously from established plants, leaving the central growing point intact. New leaves appear within days. A single plant can produce several pounds of greens per season. And since it's productive in spring and fall when most annual greens struggle, Turkish rocket fills gaps in the harvest calendar, which chews small holes in leaves. This is cosmetic damage that doesn't affect flavor or plant health. If it bothers you, row covers prevent beetle access. Just wash leaves and ignore the holes. The climbing green nobody expected. Caucasian spinach, Hablitzia tamnodes, is possibly the weirdest plant on this list. It's a perennial climbing vine that produces spinach-like leaves on 12-foot vines that die back in winter and regrow every spring. It's native to mountain forests in the Caucasus region, which explains why American gardeners have barely heard of it. The young leaves and shoots taste like mild spinach. You harvest the growing tips continuously throughout spring and early summer, and the plant keeps producing. Because it's a vine, you can grow it vertically on trellises, or let it climb existing trees. One established plant produces several pounds of greens per season from a tiny ground footprint. Train it up a 7-foot trellis, and you're harvesting from top to bottom. The growing tips are the prize, tender and mild, perfect raw or cooked. Older leaves get tougher, but remain edible cooked. Zone 3 at minimum. It tolerates heavy shade, actually preferring partial shade to full sun in hot climates. This makes it ideal for integrating into established gardens where ground space is limited but vertical space is available. You'll need to buy seeds from specialty suppliers, and germination can be tricky. Seeds need cold stratification, basically a period of cold and moisture to break dormancy. Some gardeners have better luck with fresh seeds, others struggle with any germination at all. Once you get a plant established, though, it's permanent. The root system expands slowly, and the vine returns reliably every spring. It's not aggressive like sunchokes or walking onions. It stays put and does its job quietly, producing greens in spaces where nothing else would work. Number 1. Perennial kale, the cabbage that conquered time. Several kale varieties are genuinely perennial in mild climates, living 3 to 5 years or more. We're talking about tree collards, Dobinton's kale, and thousand-head kale. These plants form woody stems over time, becoming small shrubs covered in edible leaves year-round. Tree collards can reach 6 to 8 feet tall, producing leaves continuously for 5 years or more. You harvest by cutting individual leaves or entire side branches. The plant responds by branching out more, becoming bushier, and producing even more harvest points. In mild climates zones 8 through 11, tree collards never stop growing. You're harvesting kale in January, June, and October from the same plant. Dobbinton's kale stays smaller, 3 to 4 feet, but produces incredibly tender leaves with a mild, sweet flavor. It doesn't produce seeds, so it puts all energy into leaf production. Propagation happens through cuttings, which root easily. Snap off a 6-inch stem, stick it in soil, and you have a new plant within weeks. The productivity of perennial kale is difficult to overstate. A single tree-collared plant can produce 50 to 100 pounds of leaves over its lifetime. For comparison, a typical annual kale plant produces 3 to 5 pounds total. The return on investment of perennial kale is overwhelming. These plants handle frost well, remaining productive through mild winters. Hard freezes will damage leaves but won't kill established plants. In spring, they bounce back with vigorous new growth. Treat them as annuals or bring them indoors during winter in containers. The flavor improves after frost, becoming sweeter as sugars concentrate in the leaves. Some gardeners claim perennial kale varieties are the best-tasting kale period, regardless of perennial status. The leaves stay tender longer than annual varieties, and the continuous harvest means you're always eating young growth rather than waiting for entire plants to mature. Perennial kale requires minimal maintenance. Cut branches for harvest, remove any dead wood occasionally. Feed with compost once or twice a year. That's it. The plant does everything else itself for years. So there you have it. 12 crops you plant once that keep feeding you year after year, some for decades. The perennial garden isn't just about saving time and effort. Though those benefits are real, it's about building a food system that works with nature's patterns instead of against them. It's about plants that get stronger and more productive over time instead of weaker. Perennials build soil instead of depleting it. Their deep root systems break up hardpan, mine nutrients from deep layers, and create channels for water infiltration. They provide habitat for beneficial insects year-round. They require fewer inputs, less water, and less fussing than annuals once established. Start small. Pick 2 or 3 crops from this list that excite you. Plant them this season. Learn their habits. Expand next year. Within a few years, you'll have a perennial garden producing food with a fraction of the work of a traditional annual garden. Your future self will thank you every time you walk outside and harvest dinner from plants you haven't touched in years. Now get out there and plant something that'll outlive your gardening mistakes. Thanks for watching.